I want to talk about identity. Sex and gender are defined such that they don't have to overlap. And if you're against that and you think wokeism is teaching me that, you should just take that up with the dictionary people. Sex is defined as your biological reproductive makeup. And then there's gender. And gender is a psychological identity relative to a sociological role. What is identity? Well, identity is actually a really important concept in math and science.
I'm going to give a mathematic example, and I want you to bear with me because the definition of identity explains exactly why trans people and anyone else who says, I identify as something, are completely valid and correct. And if you disagree with them, it's because you don't know what identity is.
Identity is an operator, the identity operator. You have an input, which can be a number, it can be a formula, it can be an equation, a matrix. You apply the identity operator to that input and you get an output. The key about the identity operator is that the input and the output are equivalent to each other, right? So in the example of a formula, you might have A divided by B, and then you multiply that by C over C. Anything divided by itself is 1, so you're just multiplying it by 1, and any number times 1 is just itself. But maybe you know that A times C is equal to some other variable, W. You can say, oh, I know A times C is W, so I'm going to substitute that in. And so now instead of a formula in terms of A and B, well, you know that that same thing is in terms of W, B, and C as well.
That's a really simple example, but you can do that many times over and get equations that are in terms of completely different variables. And this is how we've progressed our science forward.
And so when you're talking about identity in psychology, it's much the same thing. Your input is the self. You apply the identity operator to it, and the output is the self. In other words, it's the self's perception of the self, how you perceive you. And with gender, it's relative to these social gender roles that we've created around us. They're social constructs. That's what people mean when they say that. When someone comes to you and says, I identify as blah, for you or anyone to say, no, you're not blah because X. Insert any reason for X here. Because you don't look like it, because you don't act like it, because of your genitals. I don't care. It doesn't matter what X is. You are objectively, factually, definitively, like based on the definitions of words, wrong. Because identity is about that person's perception of themselves. But when you spread this, it harms people. So this isn't a thing where it's like, well, agree to disagree on what gender means. No, when you spread your transphobia, the suicide rates of trans people increases because you're trying to convince them that they're sick in the head. So no, I don't agree to disagree because you're harming people.